Thanks for listening to the podcast. I'm Rita. I'm here with Bob McGoldrick today, and we just recently worked on a video project for Suncoast Community Church, which is where we actually met. And through that process, I heard that you were a creative guy, and I'm like, okay, let's have a conversation. You showed me some artwork, and then you sent me a little bit of your backstory, and I'm like, we need to have a conversation on a podcast. So will you give us a little bit of your background?
Well, first of all, thanks for having me here.
Absolutely.
Other than being born at an early age, started off back in, I was born 1944, so that's 74 years ago, almost 75. I'll be 75 in March.
Nice.
In that time, it's hard to remember everything. Did a lot of stuff. Went after the service, that's right after high school. That's back when Vietnam was going on. So I volunteered for the U.S. Coast Guard.
Awesome.
I like boats. From there, came back out and decided I really need to go back to school. So I couldn't afford to go full-time because they didn't have the programs back there then that they have today. So went to night school. Went to Boston Architectural Center up in Boston. At the same time, I was working for Mobil Oil and doing basically architectural work, but just planning because I wasn't a registered architect at the time. And then moved back down to Philadelphia, where I was born and raised, and started working for Mobil down there as well. While I was still up in Boston, I did work for an architectural firm called Edward J. Tedesco and Associates, and did a lot of schools, ironically, and also did the Cambridge County Superior Court building, and that was a unique project.
Yeah.
So, but when I came back down to Philly, working for Mobil, decided I needed to start my own firm. So I did, and it was called Business Design Group. And we started out just doing interiors, and eventually worked into a full architectural firm. And we went from 3 of us, 2 of them, I had 2 partners, both female. And because of the basically 2/3 ratio, we were able to get what they call a status where you can get minorities, because women are considered minorities in the business world. So we got a lot of work through the government, which was really helpful. And we at one time had 120 employees. That's
Wow.
a lot of people, a lot of babysitting.
Yeah.
Yes. Not that I like that, but it was good. We did a lot of work, mainly around the Philadelphia area, the tri-state area we used to call it. Just Philadelphia, New Jersey, down in Baltimore, and did a few up in New York. And some of the bigger projects that I worked on was the Philadelphia Stock Exchange. And we ended up doing the San Francisco Exchange because of that one, and also the Boston Exchange.
So these are like the actual buildings?
No, actually, in this case here, we did more of the internal work. This is all the interior work. The buildings at the time were under construction. So this is, we had to get involved as the interior architects and just doing all of that. And finding out when you do places like this, there's a time frame. You have to get certain things done, because if that ticker doesn't run and things aren't working, they lose hundreds of thousands of dollars in seconds. So it's a big time frame. And back then, computers were nowhere near where they are today. So, in fact, they were just kind of like in their infancy. So it was a whole different ball game. And it was interesting. You see someone on the trading floor, and they have basically a 36-inch wide booth, and they spend hundreds of thousands of dollars for that booth to own it.
Crazy.
And it's a whole different world.
Yeah.
But I enjoyed doing it. See, from there, the firm got very big. I ended up moving to Florida, somewhere around 1990. And that was a result as, well, maybe back up a little bit. There's so much that's happened, I forgot it all. I started working as one of my biggest clients, which was Acorn Development Corporation. I knew the partners there. They hired me on. They said, we need you real bad. And now, mind you, I had my own firm. My partners bought me out, and I started working with the Acorn. And there, I basically was the owner's rep. I basically took a project from its thought to its completion.
Wow.
And it was good because we did a lot of stuff. We did, at the time I was there, we did about 14 buildings.
Wow.
And these were anywhere from just a small, maybe a 5,000 square foot building up to 130,000 and plus.
Wow.
And the biggest one we did, which was made the page of a lot of magazines, was called Four Falls Corporate Center. And they call it Four Falls because where it was located, there were actually four falls. And there was also a restaurant there called the Inn of the Four Falls. And of course, this is outside of Philadelphia, right along the main road, which is called the Schuylkill Expressway. We used to call it the Shore Kill because it's always accidents. But it was interesting. When we did the job, we had to blast rock, so we had to shut down that whole road.
Wow.
In the middle of the day. That was not cheap. And because you're blasting up rocks, and the first time we did it, I'm so glad we did because rock went everywhere.
Ooh.
Yeah, we learned the hard way. But that was an interesting building because I found out why he brought me on board because they looked at the plans and said, something's not right with this building. So I started analyzing it, and I said, it doesn't work. The parking lot for 400 cars does not work. You can only get 300 maximum. The turn ratios didn't work. So I ended up redesigning the entire building.
Wow.
And we decided to go, one of the few things we did up there, which is not common down up in the Northeast, which is post-tension concrete. That's where the floors are actually poured. Everything up there is steel. So we went from a steel building to a post-tension building, grabbing another floor height because you had height restrictions. And also I went a little bit deeper into the ground, and which caused the more explosions for the demolition.
Yeah.
But we went from 400 parking spaces to 1,000.
Wow.
And we grabbed the whole new floor of rental space. And it was two different buildings, and they were askew. And I lined them up to be next to one another. And we had a 6-story atrium between the two of them.
That's crazy.
And we had to float that atrium, which was cool.
Yeah.
It's the first ones we ever did this too. And at the same time, another innovation we did there too is the garage being underneath. Winter times up north is pretty brutal. So we actually heated the floor so that the people in the first floor wouldn't get cold feet, especially in the wintertime because concrete just holds the cold.
Yeah.
So I enjoyed doing that.
How does it feel to be in control of something like blasting rock? You know, like if you tell them that's what needs to happen, you know, how does it feel when that first explosion goes off?
Exciting.
Yeah.
It was. We had the blaster. We used to call him Crazy Eddie. He was crazy. And when the thing went up, and the rock went all over the place, he goes, "Oops, too much." just like that. And I went, "Yeah."
That's awesome.
The next time we put what they call steel blankets on top of it, which are basically steel mesh, and a couple of what they call D9s, which are big bulldozers. Put them on top of the blankets, and the next blast that went off, it actually rose that D9 about 24 feet in the air, or 24 inches in the air.
No way.
It just rose the whole thing up and back down again.
That is nuts.
Yeah.
It sounds very DIY. Like, we just need some heavy stuff up there. Let's put some big tractors up there.
No, it's a love to do the blast.
Yeah.
We had to put seismographs in all the homes around the area because all the homes were multi-million-dollar homes. And people were complaining, "Oh, my dish is rattled, my dish rattled." Well, they probably did.
Yeah. Like, you'll be fine.
You'll be fine.
That's awesome. So that moved you into where?
Well, while I was doing this whole thing, I ended up getting a brain aneurysm.
Oh, wow. I didn't know that.
Yeah, and it didn't quite make it. Well, I still have some residuals from it.
Really? Like what?
Speech.
Oh, really?
That's why I'm being very careful right now what I'm saying. Because I might think it's coming out great, but who knows? And thank God I have headphones on because I can hear myself.
Yeah.
And I can slow myself down. So if I can hear it and I understand it, okay, I'm all right. But that's the residual. But it took me at least a year because I was paralyzed on the right side. Now here's someone who does drafting and did all this kind of stuff. It's like, oh, this is not good.
Yeah.
So we decided to move to Florida. And I said, it's a slower pace, slower everything else. I didn't know if I ever get back to work again.
Wow.
So I moved back down to Florida back in 91. And my daughter was already down here. Through my one company, I did a lot of traveling all over the country, and I've always loved Florida. And knowing Florida, I said if I want to live anywhere, it would be over on the West Coast. And I went and lived in Tampa.
Nice.
And then after about 3 years, I said, I got to do something. So I tried doing real estate appraising and doing some other stuff, and ended up starting a company called Consultech and Associates. And we did basically construction inspections and planning cost reviews for new projects for the different lending, the banks and lending institutions throughout the country. And we had projects anywhere. Most of them were in Florida, but we had some up in as far away as Chicago, Philly, New York, Texas. So basically the East Coast.
Yeah. Huh. Okay. That's awesome. So let's go back.
Mm-hmm.
Let's go back to when you started sketching.
Sketching I did in high school. In fact, I went to a night school. The Philadelphia School District offered night courses at one of the art schools up there. I don't remember the name of it. And I went there for evening classes, and that's where I kind of learned to do sketching and things like that. And one of the things, other than going to Boston Architectural Center in Philly, in Boston, when I came back to Philly, I went to Philadelphia College of Art, and mainly for interior design, but they also had sketching and painting. So I just picked up some courses there just as electives.
So what was your interest? What was your draw to sketching?
Actually, it was financial.
Really?
Because I did all this stuff before AutoCAD. So if you did a project or a building and so forth, you had to render it. So that's drawing. And you have to, so people can see it and visualize it, you have to visualize it yourself. And especially when it came to interiors, because it was more difficult to do the interiors than to do the outside. The outside, you already had your plan, you had your elevations, but it's a flat elevation. Now you want to give it some depth and give it some life and put people in front of it, give it scale, stuff like that.
So that was kind of your draw, was I want to create these kind of spaces for people.
Right.
Okay.
And then show them what it would look like, because until it's done, they don't know.
Right.
And most people, as I've learned in the years, cannot visualize. Today it's much easier because AutoCAD's almost instantaneous, and people, they just have a better way of seeing things differently. I think a lot of it's because of TV.
Interesting. So did you have anybody in your family or anything that did architectural work?
No, the only person I never knew that drew was my grandmother on my mother's side. I remember her taking photographs, the black and white photographs, and actually taking a special type of oil paint and colorizing them.
Wow.
And so when they got done, she got done with them, they look like a colored photograph like we have today. But it's that was an art, because it was all said and done like a painting.
Yeah.
But for a lot of detail.
Interesting. So you got to watch her do that, or you just knew? Okay.
And I used to work with her, and she would have me sketch and do stuff like that.
Okay. How old were you when you were doing that?
Oh, I was probably 10, 12.
That's awesome. And then that led to school, and then you went to the Coast Guard.
Yes.
So tell me about your time in the Coast Guard.
Whoa. Well, first of all, I went to my first ship I was on was called the Owasco, and that was an ocean cutter. And they basically just patrol. They go out in the middle of the ocean for 30 days. They have different ocean stations, and you patrol a 210-mile sector. Remember, this is the time satellites were basically new. So it was used for search and rescue. So if something happened between the continents of Europe and the United States, you're halfway there. So you're closer than anyone else. So you did that. And you also did it for navigation. So they had ocean stations called Alpha, Bravo, Charlie, Delta, Echo. So I went from the tip of Greenland all the way down to Bermuda.
Wow.
So then Bravo was the toughest one. Very rarely you did an Alpha because it was just too rough. Bravo's the North Atlantic. North Atlantic is very rough.
Really?
It could be calm like a lake. And I've been in 100-foot seas. So it's like, but when you're out there, you get a lot of times to do stuff. So I would sketch a lot.
Interesting. And this was just like landscapes, or were you kind of thinking of people? Like, what were you sketching at that time?
Basically, anything that came to my mind, or if you had a lot of old articles around, some photographs. I didn't try to do someone else's artwork because that's just copying. I try to take a photograph or something that I saw and sketch or paint that.
So do you think that when people, because now, people trace things all the time, especially with having iPads and stuff where you have the actual pen that, like, I mean, I've done it before, where you just get a picture and you trace on top of it and then delete the picture and you're like, I totally drew it. Do you feel like that is an art form that just came because of technology advancements, or do you feel like that's, like, you wouldn't classify that kind of person as an artist?
I think it is, because I do that now. If I'm doing something to get my proportions correctly, I can still sketch it, but it's just much quicker to take and I do the projector and shoot it up on the screen. I at least get my proportions correct, and that's as far as I go with it. And most people do that because once you have that done, then you can go ahead and fill in everything else in. It just makes it for a better composition. Can you do it that way, the old-fashioned way, as I call it? Of course. But it's time-consuming and a lot of erasing.
Yeah.
Because you're constantly looking at it and looking at what you're trying to do and get the perspective right.
Right. So on the ships, it was just more of a way to pass time, or were you like, I'm going to use this skill later in life? Did you have any idea?
Didn't think I'd use it later on, but it was more a way to pass time. And I like doing it because if you're not on duty, what else do you do other than sleep? So I would either do that or do what they call course study. That's how you get up in rank.
So what's the craziest thing the craziest memory or story or something from the time in the Coast Guard?
Probably aboard the Icebreaker.
Yeah.
The Icebreaker West Wind. And we were the first cruise after Disney came on board. Walt Disney did a special with a couple of Boy Scouts on a trip up to the Arctic. And there was a whole special on the whole thing. Well, as his tribute to the ship, they designed a logo for the stack. And the stacks which come up in the middle of the ship there. Call them smokestacks now, it's just steam. But they actually designed the logo for the ship.
Wow.
And there's a lot of other Disney stuff there around the ship to kind of remind people that Disney was here.
Interesting.
It was very cool. Now, the Icebreaker is an unusual ship because it's shaped like a football underneath. It draws as much water as an aircraft carrier, but it's only 200, almost 300 feet long. Wow. And it has a flight deck on the back.
Wow.
And while I was on there, I was a meteorologist and oceanographer.
Wow.
Now those two disciplines are split, but you did weather, and you did study of the ocean, which is pretty cool.
Yeah. Man, the ocean is one of those things where, I mean, we don't know much about it just as a whole.
Deep.
But yeah, they say apparently we know more about space than we do our own oceans.
You do, because you can't. It's very difficult to get down below because of the pressures.
Right. So what kinds of things did you learn or look for in oceanography?
We basically tested water. We call BT drops, bathythermograph, I think they're still called. And basically you sent down what we call messengers on a cable. And these bottles or cylinders that are about 6 inches in diameter, and they're about 3.5 feet long. And you send down a cable, and they're attached every 50 feet. And then you send down what they call a messenger, and this thing trips them. It hits the first one, that spins around on the cable and takes a sample of the water at a different depth, and the next one sends another messenger down to the same one, goes the whole length. And when you bring it back up again, you have all these cylinders with water samples at different depths, and you check it for salinity and for whatever's in it. Interesting. And it's amazing when you get up closer to the ice, that water is not as salty as people think. You can trick it.
Really? That's
I don't know how it is today, but
yeah,
back then it was. That's back in the 60s.
Man, that's awesome. So how long were you in the Coast Guard for?
3 years.
3 years. Okay. And then directly out of that, you were like, I'm going to go be an artist, or I need to go to school. What was your mindset?
I need to get to work.
Yeah.
But I had a lot of choices, and I decided, I worked part-time at a service station where I learned to tinker with cars. But I always had a draw to doing architecture and so forth. back then, until you got your degree and everything, you couldn't do much. So I did a lot of drafting. So this is before AutoCAD even existed. So drafting is also a form of art. And back then, you can draft either with pencil or with pen and ink. Pen and ink is more permanent. And you actually did it on linen.
Wow.
People didn't know that either.
Yeah.
We used to take the old plans and the old linens and you just put them in hot water and get all that chemicals on there. And actually, you get a nice white piece of linen when you're all said and done.
Huh.
And you can take those and paint on them.
Nice.
Yeah.
So it's like a multi-purpose.
Yes. Don't waste the product.
Yeah, that's awesome. So what was your biggest project that you had to design that made you kind of feel either the most nervous before it was approved or the most proud afterwards? What was that big moment for you?
It had to be Fort Falls Corporate Center.
Okay.
It was the most pressure-wise. It was a lot. Although we ended up, when it was all said and done, with a larger building for less money. It was a very successful project, and it was the forerunner to 2 other buildings. We were going to go on the other side of the highway. So I didn't get to see those finished, but the first ones I did.
I was going to say, you started it all.
Mm-hmm.
That's awesome. So let's talk a little bit about your family. Where did you meet your wife?
Joni and I dated 40-some years ago.
Wow.
She's been my sister's best friend all this time.
Wow.
So it's like, and of course I came off of a bad divorce.
Oh, really?
Mm-hmm.
I didn't know that.
Yeah. And it was, had a regroup. I needed to regroup and went back up to Philadelphia for a full year. My business at the time, it was when everything started just falling apart. The business was going south because construction was just down. Everything was down. So I had a multi-million-dollar business that was down to maybe $200,000 a year, and that's not very much.
Yeah. When was this?
This is back in, it started back in 2008.
Okay.
But it was 2012 that I went back up to Philadelphia. And I just had to regroup myself. And it's like, here I am at my age, regrouping. And it was the toughest, gut-wrenching thing I've ever done.
Really?
Mm-hmm.
What was the hardest part?
Driving back up I-95 after selling everything and giving my business to my partner, because it can only sustain one person. And going up there and just saying, I'm going back to where I was born with a small van loaded with everything I own. No longer have a car, got rid of it, and moving in with my sister. And that was like an eye-opener. But what I ended up being probably the best thing that happened.
Why do you say that?
Joni came out of it. And because she's always been with my sister as a friend and always been in Philadelphia. And I always kept track of Joni, but just as a friend. And we reconnected. And when I said, I have to go back to Florida, I says, yeah, Philly's nice, but yeah, it's nice to be from. And yeah, and I wanted to go back to Florida, but I didn't want to go back to Tampa. Too many bad memories. So I said, I want to go where my daughter is, which is Sarasota. And I came back here, and Joni came with me. And we were actually married on February 14th on the beach.
Oh,
When they had that big ceremony out there, that's when we did it.
that's awesome.
It was pretty cool.
Yeah.
And
So I want to know how you went from friends to then, I mean, she's your wife. So how did that, was it one of those things where you had feelings and then you were like, does she also?
kind of. And she kind of woke me up a little bit. Now, she woke me up a lot.
Yeah.
I'll be very fair about it. But Joni comes from a hard background herself. I mean, she still has to take care of her son, who's the same age as my daughter. And through that, she actually raised her grandson because the son couldn't do anymore. He's mental issues. And his name is Paul. And Paul and my daughter Dawn are basically the same age.
Okay. So you were there, it was kind of that dark time. Was she just kind of there as a friend initially, or was it one of those things where you went back and you were just kind of in your zone and you brought yourself out of it? Like, how did that transition happen in your life?
She was a friend, and she said, you just have to get out and do stuff. And I did. We went on a couple things together. Actually, we went with all my sister's friends too. So it's me, the guy, with 5 other girls, and I knew them all for a lot of years. And my sister lost her husband a few years back, so she was hanging out with her girlfriends. And Joni because we had history, we went and talked about different things and so forth, and we decided to go out a couple places by ourselves, just the 2 of us, and one thing led to another. And actually, the biggest thing was, it was Veterans Day in Philadelphia, and she says, I am taking you out. So we went to a place called the Mashula. Mashula is a sailing ship in Philadelphia. There's a restaurant. It's very exclusive. It's right there in the Delaware. In fact, I actually painted that.
Oh.
And again, it's hanging in our condo right now. And that's where she took me to for a really official first date. We were very all dressed up and so forth, because in Philadelphia you do dress up for dinners. And unbeknown to both of us, when they found out I was a veteran on Veterans Day, they comped my meal. So she says, you're a cheap date. I like this.
Nice. That's awesome. So she sounds like she has that fire for life, you
She
know?
does.
Yeah.
Joni went from not finishing school to finishing college. And she went into nursing. She was an ER nurse for about 15 years. If it wasn't for the fact that she had to take care of her mother who was dying of cancer, she would have been a doctor today.
Wow.
She's
So
good.
she has drive.
Yes,
That's
very
awesome.
much so.
And then she was the one who suggested that you take art classes with your daughter?
It was funny. She says, growing up, she's always had an attachment to her dad. She said, and one thing I remember is doing things with my dad. She said, you need to do more of that with your daughter. I said, you're absolutely right. So she says, what do you want to do? I said, well, computerism's out. I can't do that. So let's do art classes. And there was a place up in Lakewood Ranch called Let's Create Art. So we went up, and my daughter and I did classes up there. And we just painted together for every Wednesday in the mornings. And we did that for a couple of years. And we both got better and better and better. What really precipitated all that was Joni suggested, let's go to painting with a twist. And we did it as a group. Joni went there. Actually, Joni's sister was down for a visit, and my granddaughter. So we all went to painting with a twist, and that kind of got us started. That was where it started. I still have those paintings.
Really?
Yeah, and that was a Valentine's Day thing, too, because we painted hearts was the first thing we had to paint. And they're saying, this is what you have to paint to have a demonstration up there, what you should paint like. I'm going, I can't paint that. That's too simple.
Too simple.
I had to make it look a lot. She goes, well, that's not what's up there, but I like what you did.
Yeah. That's a really interesting way to get people into painting. I've heard a lot of people say that
Yes.
about painting with a twist, which for anybody listening, if they don't know, this is a class that's led by the instructor, and it's kind of a step-by-step process.
Correct.
But then you're also, the twist is that you're drinking wine.
Well, we weren't that time, but yes, you
Okay.
can. They have the wine and cheese parties.
Okay.
Those are for the adults. Yeah, because there were some of the children were there as well, so just plain painting.
No wine for them.
No, yeah, juice.
Yeah. So where did your love for actual paint? Because that's a different thing. I feel like a lot of people think that artists can just do all mediums, but when you work with pencils, pens, paints, it's kind of a little bit of a different game. Or do you feel like now that you've done all of it, it's just kind of, you can do whatever?
I could. You end up liking one better than the other. Don't know why. Just like some people set up their own genre as far as what they like to paint. Some people just do portraits. Some people like to just do flowers or something different or abstract, whatever it may be. I like trying everything, and I like trying new different ways of doing things. For instance, some of my work, when I first did it, is called blending, and you can do blending much easier in oils because oils takes a long time to dry, and you can blend it. But trying to blend in acrylics, which dries very quickly, is very difficult. But I've learned how to do it, and it's called, I think they call it splunging or something like that. They just kind of splatter it on there. It's pretty cool.
Nice.
But you have to work quick, very quick. So if you're an older person, move slow, go back to the oils.
Nice. That's a good tip. So You showed me some of your art, and I can't wait to go over those in the little coffee talk that we're going to do. But I want to know about your journey through the art that you've done. Because you have a lot of pieces. Can you kind of go back to the beginning of the kind of consistent painting?
Yes. Some of it was challenging. The biggest one I did where I learned to do blending was it was an iris I painted. And it was the first time I've ever done blending at all in oils. And the instructor kind of told us how to do all this stuff. It took me a long time to learn to do the blending oil. Well, first of all, you have to wait till it dries, and it takes a couple days for it to go to the next process. You could do one leaf, and it'd take you 3 weeks.
Wow.
You need a lot of patience.
Huh.
But what a lot of artists do, they'll take that and they'll do that and do another piece. So they could be working on 3 or 4 pieces at one time because if they're working on oils.
Mm-hmm.
So I said, I can't wait for stuff to dry this long. So I went to acrylics. And the other thing I did in between, which was called the carousel, which you'll probably see, that is an actual carousel in Ocean City, New Jersey. And it's where the family still goes now and then, because being from Philadelphia, everybody went to the shore, and that's the Jersey coast. And we used to either go to the seaside, which is no longer, the places we used to go to no longer exist. Hurricane Sandy kind of took that away.
Oh, wow.
But Ocean City is the other spot. And they used to go on the carousel. My granddaughter loved riding the carousel, so we painted it. And what I did is I took that whole carousel and both sides of it. One side was the place where we got hot dogs all the time, and the other side was where we got the custard, frozen custard. So I kind of moved them into the picture as well. And I actually put my granddaughter in one of the seats in the oil painting, the painting as well. That's a combination of acrylics and oils.
Ooh.
That took a long time because it was all the decorative horses. And
oh, yeah.
my granddaughter being in the horses, she's got 2 now.
Oh.
Yeah, one rescue horse and one they purchased outright.
Nice.
But
So it almost sounds like you add this meaning to it, to the pictures. It's like you put some of your memories, some of you like what you like in life. It's almost like you put those and they're contained inside of the pictures that you do.
Well, a couple of pieces I did, for some reason, the roosters, especially last year, were in. And a client who goes to this church was doing a new home, and their theme was roosters in the kitchen and so forth. And she wanted me to paint some roosters. Actually, it was her husband wanted that done as a present for her because she collected roosters. So I did that. I painted these roosters, and I did it in different techniques. I used not just brush, I used a palette knife and a lot of color. And I must have painted at least a dozen roosters. I think they're a pain in the butt now. But, once you do it, you've done it.
Yeah.
But there's so many different, I didn't know in studying and seeing what's out there, there are thousands of different types.
Of roosters?
Yes, and they're very colorful.
Yeah.
I mean, all over the world, it's like, wow, that's a rooster? But it is.
Huh. So through painting, you're also learning about the subject.
Yes.
Interesting. What's your favorite thing to paint?
I like to do sunsets, although they're kind of like boring because it's a lot of color. I like the color. But I've gotten to the point where I really enjoy doing faces. And I've only done a few of them. One I did was the man from Connemara when we went to Ireland, Connemara Marble, which is the Connemara area of Ireland. And there was a book there about Connemara. And on the cover was the faces of this man who lives there. He's a resident. I think James is his real name. And I said, it's such an interesting face. And I've never painted before faces. So I said, I'm going to try it. And I did. I tried it when we were painting over at the Lakewood Ranch. And one of the instructors there, who was not the normal one, she did that. And she kind of gave me some pointers and so forth and showed me how to do the blending and how to use the colors. And it's the one thing I learned, you make your darks darker and your lights lighter. And that gives you that relief, so it gives it a 3D effect. So I did that. I also painted one of, since Ireland was a good one, people of Ireland have some pretty neat faces.
Yeah.
I painted Joni's, it's really her aunt who lives there permanently. And I painted her at the age that she is about 5 years ago. But I took a lot of the wrinkles out. And it looks just like her. And it's going to be displayed over her eventually because she donated money from the sale of her house to the church. And they actually renovated this school over there to become it's a one-room school. It's now like the community center in Ballantoy. Ballantoy is in Northern Ireland. And that is where a lot of the Game of Thrones is shot.
Ooh.
Yeah, so they're in the harbor. And she worked in that harbor restaurant there for years. So she's well known. So decided to do a painting of her.
That's
and
awesome.
Eventually we'll get it over to her. I was going to try to take it on the plane, but I got to take it by itself because it's too big to put into a suitcase. You know how planes are.
Yeah. So I've heard, you've told me a few of the paintings that you've done. If it's on display somewhere and somebody comes in and says, oh, and they have a story about it, you gift them the painting.
Actually, I did that with my neighbor. I did a painting of Venice. And that was one I started also when I was over at Lakewood Ranch. And she just lost her husband. And they spent their honeymoon in Venice. And she saw the painting. She goes, oh, it reminds me so much of our honeymoon and so forth. And obviously, they were together for many, many years. So I gave it to her. I just said, you need to see this in your room, in your house, more than I do. And she was just the look on her face, the emotion there. And every time she sees it, she's reminded of her husband and that great time they had together. And they've been back there several times afterwards. They were born and raised in Croatia.
Wow.
So they had a pretty tough journey in their life, but it's a good memory.
Yeah.
And her daughter was down last time, and she saw pictures of it, but she saw the actual painting. She goes, wow. So that makes everything.
Yeah.
And I also did a lot of the florals, and they're now over in Ireland for Joni's aunt.
So is it Joni that has connections to Ireland, or both of you?
We both do now.
Okay.
Joni's been going back and forth to Ireland for years with her aunt over there and several other family members. Last year, I went over and visited my family. Not many McGoldricks, but I actually stood on land where my grandparents lived, and there's no one there, but I was the first McGoldrick to stand on that piece of land in 100 years.
Wow.
And I said, whoa. But I also saw why they left, because it's beautiful land, but they say you can't eat the dirt. So you can't eat the scenery. So it's like, I understand why there was just nothing there. They were stonemasons. And I found out that they actually, a lot of the crosses that are on the churches over there, they made them.
Interesting.
So it went from stonemason. So art has always been in the family somewhere.
Yeah.
And some of the stonework in the houses that they made, they say you can always tell McGoldrick house because the stonework, the corners were so sharp. And there's an inn over there, one of the towns, I don't remember the name, that the fireplace is made from the stone from the old McGoldrick house.
Wow.
So the house still lives.
Yeah.
The foundation was still there, but that's about all you could see.
Huh. I like that. So we have your latest piece. That's what this is on the screen right now. And I was just saying when you got in here that it looks so just smooth and soft. Like it brings some kind of emotion out in me. And you said that this was a new technique.
Right. This is the blending, or what they call splunging.
Okay.
That's it right there. That's acrylics. So to blend the blue up into the yellow orange in the area, you have that green in between. You just take a paintbrush, it's a dry brush, and you just put very little paint on it. You just basically splunge it till you get the blending. It's tedious, but it's good. It works out very well. And of course, the white spots are just the reflection off the skin of the show lights, because it's a showgirl, obviously, because of the painted face.
That's awesome. Was this something that you just saw in your head, or was this?
This is a photograph I saw, and I said, "Oh, if I change this, and this, I could paint this." I keep a whole log of them on my computer what I want to paint. It's pretty large, but I said I want to do this, and I wanted to make it bigger. And also, when I painted over the Barbosas, paintings like this, people desire. So this is not as big as I would like it to be. It's only like 20 by 30. If I did it again, which I probably will, I'll make it much, much larger.
So let's talk a little bit about Barbossa's, which is an Italian restaurant that's in town. And I went there last night and saw, I mean, this is just an artist's haven, essentially. I mean, there's just paintings everywhere. But what's so cool is that they have live painters. And you've done that before.
Yes.
What did you paint there?
Two things I painted there. I painted one rooster. That was the first thing I had to do. It's nerve-wracking almost, because you're painting there and right behind you with 5 feet are the people eating dinner. And they're constantly, they don't think you can hear them, but every word they say, like, he doesn't have that. The rooster I was doing, I was painting it upside down to get the proper stroke with the palette knife, because if I did it the other way, the tip is wrong. So a lot of explanation there, but you painted it upside down, and you get the people at the back there going, "Does he know he's painting it upside down?" Yeah, yeah, I do.
You should turn around like.
Well, what I did when I heard it, that's exactly what I did. I turned it up right side up and stood back just because, like, I heard you.
Yeah, exactly. That's amazing. So, painting in front of a live audience, do you feel like you second guess yourself a little bit more?
No.
No?
No. I figured if had the talent, they'd be up there.
That's such a good way to look at it.
Yeah. That's the only reason why. And they don't know what's in my mind.
Yeah. Okay, so speaking of your mind, this is a little question for me. I'm curious. So a lot of times creative people, especially artists, something where you kind of have to visualize and then you focus on what's in your head, and especially when you can put it on canvas, I feel like you see life a different way. It's almost like you're always looking for beauty in something, or like, ooh, I could paint that. Ooh, I could paint that. So what would you say your philosophy on life is? When you wake up in the morning, what do you think?
Well, first of all, I'm just glad I wake up. So I'm grateful for that. There's a lot of beauty in this world. And every time I look around, I'm going, God created all of this. It's amazing. And we're still learning about it. And there's beauty everywhere. And even some areas that have sadness built into it, there's a beauty to it. And it's not a beauty that's maybe desirable, but there's a beauty there. There's something in the expression of people's faces when they're in pain or whatever. It's just interesting to capture that instant of time. It's nice to do that. And I like doing that. And also seeing it from a different viewpoint. I think good painters paint things that you can't capture on camera, or you haven't seen on a common basis. And I just enjoy doing stuff like that. And then taking something maybe has been done before and putting a different twist on it.
Mm-hmm. Do you feel like you live in that moment longer? So let's say you're painting the rooster. Do you start to almost just everything as a rooster now?
Yes, you do. I look at the color when I get into stuff like that. I love color. People say, what's your favorite color? All of them. So I just like color. I try to paint with music. And I can't do music that has words because that puts an idea into your head. So in fact, I learned this back in my early days, back doing artwork at the which one was it? The Philadelphia Museum of Art. I did classes there, and they did that. They say, okay, we're going to play music. What do you interpret the music is saying to you, and put it in art?
Ooh.
And that was challenging. It's amazing. You have basically at the time 50 people in the room, and you had at least 30 different ideas. Some people came up with the same idea, but it was amazing, and I liked doing that. And I've been doing it all the time. I don't put sports games or anything like that on while I'm painting. I just can't do it.
What's your music choice?
Usually it's either slow jazz or smooth jazz, or what they call it, soundscapes. I listen to that. It can't have words to it because then it just that automatically puts a thought in your head.
Right. Do you identify certain pieces that you've done with music? Like if you heard the song again, would you kind of flash back to something that you were using, or does it just kind of filter in the background?
Just filters in the background because it takes too long. Your songs are over, 3 minutes, 4
Right.
minutes? Yeah, you don't do a painting that fast.
Right.
You can do a sketch that quick. In fact, I did take a course where you were encouraged to sketch as fast as you possibly could. And it's just more or less learn techniques. And that was pen and inks. So
Is that difficult?
it is. We basically did it in pencil first, and then you go over again with your pen and inks and do all your shading and so forth. I didn't show any of this. I think I have one example of the pen and inks I did, not many.
Yeah, you did send that to me, and it's interesting because, especially with your work, there's such a variety. Like you do start to kind of see, okay, I see semblances of the same artist, the same creator. Do you feel like you have a style that you stick to? Or, I mean, you said that you like to try new things, but do you always kind of come back to a specific technique or some sort of look?
I don't. A lot of artists do. They have something they feel very comfortable with. Some of them do it because that's where they make their living. And people like that style, so they stay with it and they perfect it. I like to try different things, so I'm always out there. I'll go back to something I've done previous because I said, if I did it again, I could do it better. Like everything else, you do something more than once, second time, third time, and so forth, down the line, it's much better every time, hopefully.
Yeah. Is that something do you ever struggle with self-criticism? Like if you do something and you're like, oh, I don't like this, and somebody else is like, no, it's good. Is that ever a thing for you?
Every piece.
Really?
I'm looking at this one right now on the screen, and I'm looking at it going, I could have changed this, I could have this, I want to do it. In fact, the next time I do it, I will do that. I've already got it. But you get to a point, you have to say, okay, it's done. It's enough. And you get tired of looking at it. Mm-hmm. So it's something just in your own mind.
I mean, I think that's a thing that artists have anyways, though. Any kind of creative person, I feel like you have to be open and sensitive to just the world in general. And then your work, it kind of funnels into this, like you are creating something that is either in your head, but once it gets down on that canvas, it changes. It becomes this active piece. It's kind of this tug back and forth. So what would you say to yourself? Let's say you're working on a piece and you're just not feeling like it's coming out the way that you saw it in your head. Do you talk yourself up? Do you hype yourself? What's the thing that you do to just keep moving forward?
I usually stop and sit back or step back. Sometimes I'll put a piece down for months and just say, I just have to think about this and go on to something else. It's not doing what I envisioned it to do. So it's like you have to go back and say, this is not it. And when you do go back, many times I'll wake up at night. And Johnny says, where are you going now? Going to the computer. No. I don't really paint at night because I just don't. But I'll at least go down and put some of my ideas down and sketch them. And when I had the architectural firm and so forth, I always kept a pad and pencil next to me in bed because I do a lot of space planning. And I couldn't get something to work out, and I'd be sleeping. It's amazing. You're asleep maybe a half an hour, and you just start getting the zone, and the idea comes to you, and you quick get up, and you write out what you thought, or sketch it out. Many times I've sketched out floor plans, and it's like, wow, got it. This is how it's going to work. Yeah.
That's really interesting that happens with drawing, because I mean that's such a visual thing, especially if it comes to you. Do you feel like, I mean, sleep, they always say like to learn a song or something, when you sleep it's almost like your brain kind of processes whatever you're trying to do a little better, so then you wake up and you're like, I have all the lyrics now, like I have learned the song. So do you feel like with art it's inspiration based, to where if you don't sketch it right away you'll lose it?
Yes.
Really?
Yes. It's like there. Well, the thing is, you can't go back to sleep until you do it. That's the final completion. What's the first act of getting something done? Put it on paper. So if you ever thought about doing something or a task and so forth, write it down so you don't forget it. To do this.
Yeah, that's I mean, I don't write things down as often as I should, for sure, because I just, stupidly think, oh, I'll remember that. But
I know.
There's way too many things to think about.
Well, can't you text it on your phone, or is there a spot there to do it?
Okay, so I have a question for you that relates to that. So do you feel like there is something different when you physically draw it with your hand or write something with your hand versus just typing it into a screen?
I've never really tried. Well, first of all, I wrote different things on the computer and so forth because a lot of my work with Console Tech was writing reports. So we write reports right and left. And you have to be somewhat creative doing the reports because people read these and you have to say, who am I addressing the report to? Who's the audience? So how do I tailor it to take architectural or construction terms and put it into banking terms so they understand what I'm talking about? So that's one thing you have to do there. But this new genre out there right now is how do you paint and draw on a computer. I haven't gotten that down yet. I've bought the programs. I've looked at the programs. I'm going, this is just too difficult. I can just get a paintbrush and do the same thing and get the same. But I also know that you can probably do a lot more on that computer that I could never do before.
Is this Photoshop that
Yes.
you were looking at? Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I think learning programs is one of the biggest hurdles, honestly.
Yes. In my generation, it's very difficult.
I mean, my generation. I mean,
Not that far behind.
It's difficult just because it's not intuitive. Like when you sit with a canvas and you have your brushes and all of that, you can, especially if you've done it before, you have this technique and it's like the idea can flow out faster because you know how to do it. That's what I feel like the biggest frustration with a lot of creative people is if you have to learn a program and you're excited about the thing that you're working on, but you just can't get it to work just because you're trying to find the button that does the thing that you want. I feel like a lot of that excitement can leave. And
Yes.
It's kind of like where you have to kind of balance okay, I have to learn this in order to get better, but how long is this going to take? So do you feel like you will keep trying to learn Photoshop?
Oh, yes. So not only that, I do an AutoCAD because I can draft much faster. Well, I can do the initial plan much faster just drafting it than I can in AutoCAD. But the product isn't as good. And the changes are much more difficult. You have to erase it. Mm. But learning the process of AutoCAD, I said, I can do this in seconds. And I'm trying to still fuddle around here with AutoCAD, how to get this to do this or that to change this. But when you're all said and done, when I'm done the drawing freehand or with a pen and ink, I can't take and make a 3D image out of it. Where AutoCAD, I just flip a button and whoa, there's a 3D. A little different.
Yeah. So what's in the future for you?
Well, I'm still continuing to work. I'm working with Southwest Concrete and Masonry, and it's amazing. I used to do the plans for masonry and stuff like that. Now, we build it, and I look at it from a whole different aspect. From the different materials. When I'm designing rebar back then, I just call it a number and a name. Now I actually have to order it and see it built and look at the guys tying it in and so forth, etc., and know what they all are. And it's a whole different world, but I like it. I like the challenges and so forth. And on the other side, too, they also do developing of single-family homes. And most of the homes we do are all custom. And, of course, even the other work we do, most of the homes we do are all custom multi-million-dollar homes. And it's a specialty type of concrete work we do because no two are alike. Mm-hmm. And architects and engineers go nuts. And we're trying to constantly correct the mistakes. But I like it. It's good. It keeps me fresh. It keeps me going. I don't mind it at all.
What about art? What's in the future for you?
Well, the drawback of working full-time, again, is I don't get to do painting as much as I did. So I have to squeeze it in. And I have to do it when the timing is right. I can't do it when I'm tired. So when the mood gets there, I'll paint. I do have a studio set up in the condo. As small as it may be, it works. And there's always a painting on the easel. So I constantly walk past it when I go into the bedroom. And I see it, and I'm going, I got to get this. I got to get to this. I want to finish it. And things get in my mind. And I look at it, and I'll stand back, and just for maybe 5 or 10 seconds, I'll say, oh, if I change that and change that. So I make little mental notes of things I want to do. Then eventually I get enough of them, I got to do it
Yeah.
before I forget them.
What's on the canvas right now?
Right now, I have a very large flower, and I'm doing it differently because the light is actually coming from within the flower.
Ooh.
So it's different. There's a photograph of it. I saw it on the computer, and I saved pieces I like. And again, they have to be a photograph because I don't want to do other people's artwork. And I saw this, and I said, this is a different twist. I wonder if I could paint this. Now, doing it in photography is one thing, but doing it in art is going to be a whole different challenge. And to get something to feel like it's light shining out. I mean, light is light, but there's no source of light here other than the color. So it's like, this is going to be a challenge. So far, it's a work in progress.
As is life.
Yes.
Well, this has been a lot of fun. Thank you so much for being our flagship podcast.
I enjoy this.
Well, we'll have to have you back, and especially to look through more pictures. We tried to get them on the TV, and the airdrop just wasn't working. But thanks for being here.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely.